previous 4 episodes, you saw some of the components that make up the wildfire crisis. You heard from experts about what the Forest Service's strategy entails and who will benefit. You got an idea of how big the landscape highlighted in this strategy is and the scale and complexity of work that will be required to make a difference. We can't do it alone. In this final episode, we will focus on the importance of partnerships in this landscape scale effort.
We have a 2.2 million acre forest. It is massive. We don't have anywhere near the staff that we would need to actually get after every acre at an interval that we would need to in order to make certain that we can actually consistently maintain and retain that resilience and that healthy forest landscape. Baked into the wildfire crisis strategy at every turn is an emphasis on partnering and making sure that we are working across boundaries, and not just across forest boundaries, but also across jurisdictional boundaries.
So this is one of the few landscapes that operates across 2 state boundaries, but also incorporates a significant amount of Department of Interior lands, which includes National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and other partners, and then a very significant partnership with local tribes.
We can't solve it overnight, and we can't solve it by ourselves. What it takes is working with partners. And the really nice thing about working on the 6 rivers is we have great community engagement. We have great partners. I mentioned the fire safe councils, our tribal partners, our exceptional partners that are helping us look at what we need to do, and in fact doing a lot of the work as well.
Our timber industry folks that we've been working with, the states of California and Oregon, as well as all the partners that we're working with across the landscape, the way that we're successful as an agency in terms of creating these outcomes is something that we're going to do together and collectively.
If we're not able to work with our partners, work with the folks that are interested in public lands and National Forest System lands to start addressing things at the scale of the problem, it's going to happen of its own accord. And so the wildfire crisis strategy helps bring into focus the type of work that needs to be done, the scale of the work that needs to be done, and has also brought a lot of resources.
It's also important that treatments, such as prescribed fire, mastication, and mechanical thinning, do not just stop at national forest boundaries. Instead, treatments should be connected across the landscape, across jurisdictions to be most effective.
We need to be able to step back and look at this as a landscape. We've done a lot of cross-boundary work because wildlife and wildfires don't stop at fence lines. They're going to move across onto private property just the same as they will onto public property. And so we're working with all of our partners to try to find ways to make that a more holistic landscape treatment.
This project that I'm standing in is 66,000 acres that we're going to get out the door that we don't have the staff to do, that partnering with contractors we can get that work done. It'll be a 66,000 acre contract that currently is solicited. So we'll get proposals from contractors, how can they best meet the needs that we want to achieve out here. The way that we prep the landscape to ultimately get fire back in it is we cut all these little trees behind me, we get those out of here. To do that, we've got to partner with our contractors. It takes a skilled workforce to do that work. First, we've got to prep the area so that our contractors know where we want them to do what. That takes a lot of manpower out walking the ground, figuring out exactly where do we want them to cut which trees.
And so by working together, we're going to put more fire on the ground with the tribe and the Forest Service to reduce the fuel loading.
It takes a village. It's not going to be the Forest Service alone. It's going to be the Forest Service, community members, the tribes, industrial forest complex out here as well. And they're also part of the people looking to find solutions on how we manage that and work together to abate these hazards.
We're working really hard on the Shasta-McLeod Management Unit to reduce the amount of fuels and reduce the amount of stocking in our stands because we're overstocked on a whole. This is the McBride Plantations project area that we're working in, and the district planned the treatment back in 2018. It's 3,000 acres of treatment total that includes commercial and pre-commercial thinning of the conifers and fuel reduction work, reducing the brush. We put in a 1 mile long fuel break on the south end of the project area where it butts up against the city limits. So the treatment out here in general was to thin these trees out at about a 40-foot spacing.
Getting funding from something like the Klamath Basin restoration funding that we're getting is really enabling us to enact these projects sooner and quicker, because we may not have 10 or 20 or 30 years to rebuild resiliency in something like a riparian ecosystem.
We work on a lot of cross-boundary forest health, wildfire risk reduction projects, just to get these landscapes back into more of a historical density and brush cover, and ideally to set them up for maintenance in the future, hopefully with prescribed fire. We did private lands treatments through a mix of funding sources from state and federal sources, and the Forest Service at the same time worked with funding to treat the public land side.
So the beauty of having the Klamath River Basin, the whole Klamath River Basin, inside this landscape strategy and as its own wildfire crisis strategy landscape, is that it gives us not only the direction about what our agency wants us to start doing with this land, but also the funding to be able to reach out to the different partners and the different jurisdictions that we have within this landscape to ensure that we can actually start building projects that cross boundaries and that take on this issue at this larger scale.
We're seeing actually on this project, we have a varied group of cooperators from our state agencies to contract resources to other partners that we have helping us implement this burn. But generally, it's enabled us to put a lot more money back into the community and bring in more entities to get more work done across boundaries.
So this is where the Klamath River Community Hall was during the McKinney fire. When the fire came through, it took out the building which had been put up in 1948. Behind us here we have some logs that the Forest Service had donated that were some burnt trees from the McKinney fire. They have a gentleman that has come out to mill that wood. He is also able to grade the wood so that we can start to rebuild the community center. So I think having the community center rebuilt will kind of bring people back together and let them know that we can rebuild.
This is a time to be bold. This is a time to really think to the future. But more importantly, it's really a time to take action. We have an opportunity here, and how we work together as partners and how we collaborate together will determine our ability to get things done.
Just as all the participants of an ecosystem rely on one another, from the soil and water to the trees and the wildlife on land and in streams. Low-intensity fire that cleans landscapes and recycles nutrients, agencies, organizations, and communities are relying on each other. Experts and land managers from a wide variety of fields and partners are collaborating to meet the scale and demand of the challenge ahead. Together, they are confronting the wildfire crisis, not just in the Klamath River Basin, but on at-risk landscapes across the country.